welcome to the second in my series of Conscious Conversations video interviews. I'm Cassandra Eve. I'm an astrologer, soul coach, retreat facilitator, and I'm an author of a book called Sacred Pathways, Discovering Divine Feminine Archetypes in You. The series of Conscious Conversations is based around the archetypes in this book. And this morning I have with me Lorna Munro, who is the soul synergist. Welcome, Lorna. Thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, Cassandra. Thank you for inviting me on. We appreciate
I think
it.
we're gonna have a good chat about Psyche. So before we start focusing on Psyche, who or what is the soul synergist? What would that mean to someone?
What would that mean to someone? I've only just taken ownership of that title, and for me, it was just bringing my whole self into that wholeness. I think we're going to be chatting about, and synergizing that, because I mean, if you Google synergy, not synergy, but synthesis, it's all about music components or chemical components, and we are all that, aren't we? So I think it's just about taking all that parts and making my own tune.
Wow, that's a wonderful way to describe it, actually, creating your own tune. So the synergy of all the different aspects of who you are, in a conscious unity, because of course it is unity anyway, but it's about making that conscious, isn't it?
Absolutely, and it's just bringing it into equilibrium and harmony.
Wonderful, wonderful. So it really speaks of Psyche's journey. So I'm going to introduce her now in terms of what she represents. So in her mythology, she's a young girl who is taken on a journey, and she seems to be very passive in that journey. But that passivity reflects her quality of innocence, the quality of the soul just newly arrived on the earth that has to find its way through, you know, the ups and downs of our humanness and learn, grow and evolve through that. So she is that journey to wholeness or maturity, and particularly from what we would call victim consciousness. And also she represents the journey in relationship. So in her mythology, she's brought a lover and she falls in love. It's kind of a strange term, that really, isn't it? Falls in love. But that's actually often what happens, isn't it? Because we kind of dive into this period of grace. But then inevitably that period of grace seems to disintegrate or disappear. And then we're called to mature in what love is, to actually learn to live love. So Psyche represents all those journeys. So she's a very complex archetype, and I was particularly drawn to talk to you about her because of your book, Living in 3D, Drink, Drugs and Denial. So you've clearly taken a long journey with the archetype of Psyche. So I just want to introduce her a little bit more by reading a passage from my book to introduce her. So Psyche sits at the center of the Sacred Pathways mandala with Venus. And the mandala is how these energies, the archetypal energies that I'm presenting in the book, work together. And Venus, I explored in my last conversation video with Andrea Michelle Kennedy. So as Venus represents the creative power of the feminine expressing through woman, Psyche represents the innocence of the soul and its journey in our human realm. Both are central to our consciousness in terms of evolving embodied maturity here on earth. In the Greek language, the word psyche means breath, life, or soul. It also means butterfly. These descriptions provide us with clues as to Psyche's way of being. Her myth reveals the soul's journey through experience into maturity. The young Psyche's sweet innocence is like the first breath of the soul newly arrived in a body. Her journey is that of a baby, taking the journey into humanness and beyond it into full soul expression. Psyche's myth reveals to us the stages of that journey, like the development of egg to caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly. Psyche's story reveals how we have the potential to move through distinct stages of development in order to fully embody our soul energy. The journey of Psyche reveals there is no end to our potential for growth whilst in a human body. Psyche's myth reveals to us the heroine's journey. It reveals the evolution of innocence to strength, authenticity, maturity, and wholeness. Yet it's so much more, as we shall discover. Psyche's journey reveals the evolving integration of soul and humanness. It is a mirror for our own stages of development, revealing where and how we may get stuck in unconscious patterns of thinking and behavior, and how we may move into maturity. In particular, it reveals the deep inner processes available to us through relationship, how relating acts both as an invitation and a catalyst for us to grow. It reveals how what we see as obstacles, either within or in our relationships, are in fact vehicles for the growth of maturity. So your book, which I've read and really spoke to me of Psyche's journey. So your book, Living in 3D, Drink, Drugs and Denial, reflects that journey of Psyche so powerfully. So looking at that journey that you described in the book, what was your most powerful discovery through going through that human experience?
I contemplated the question. It's really been freedom. Freedom from an emotional prison cell that I created for myself through that journey. You know, I had to come full circle, if you like. That's what it feels like. I was feeling quite emotional when you were reading it. It was beautiful because although I've read that part of the book as well, of your book, I was like, hearing you reading it again was just like, wow, that's super powerful, because I do identify with that. Really do identify with that. My whole body's in chills right now. And yeah, freedom from that emotional place that I was stuck in. I was stuck in lots of different places, but it came to me recently that it's really been the emotional side of the human that I did most battle with, I think. You know, the spirit was very much still alive, but maybe in the wrong type of spirit. But it's more the emotional freedom to master the emotions as well. It's really, really. Just talked about this morning actually with somebody, how I was an only child till I was 12 and a half, and you know, along came two sisters very rapidly after that, and my poor old mum, she probably couldn't deal with this highly strung teenager, two babies really, two toddlers, and you know, I was very emotional drama queen, so you know, that side of me as a teenager really couldn't be dealt with in a way that was going to put me onto a journey that was going to be balanced.
And of course, that's a time of a huge transition in a young woman's life anyway, isn't it? When you're in the physically and physiologically, the hormone surge and the conflicting emotions and that desire to both be independent yet still be a child. And of course, your mum just having those two little ones, sisters, which I'm going to go on to in a minute as well. It's like kind of threw you into that place of early independence in a way, didn't it? And trying to find your way. Yeah. So there's a point in Psyche's myth where she's experiencing her love, Eros, has been brought to her. And she's in this beautiful castle with these wonderful gardens, and she's being really taken care of. But there is one challenge in that her lover, Eros, only comes to her at night in the darkness, and she's not allowed to see him. So there's a threat that if she tries to see who he is, that the beautiful palace and the wonderful life that she's experiencing will just disappear, and so will he. And for a while she's content in that, not seeing him, not knowing really who he is. But eventually her sisters come to visit her, and her sisters start to voice what is already arising in Psyche as subconscious doubts, like, who is he? You know, what is this really about? What does he really want? And they start to bring all these questions to her, and they even say, you know, he might be a monster, because earlier in the myth, it was threatened that she would be married to a monster, to a dragon. And so they suggest to her that she lights the lamp. One night, she lights the lamp and she takes a good look at him. And to me, this point in the myth is the point that reflects similarly to Eve in the Garden of Eden. You know, take the bite of the apple, you know, wanting to know more, wanting to discover beyond, you know, the illusion, and it's wanting to grow as well. It's wanting to move beyond that state of, let's call it blissful ignorance. Yeah. So I see in my life how there was a point when I lit the lamp, and it was a point where everything in my life was falling apart. And so my consciousness turned inside. I started to question myself and what was I doing? Why was this happening in my life? And so on. So what was that point in you? Was there one point, or were there a series of points where you actually lit the lamp of consciousness and you woke up?
Oh boy, good question. I would say there was a series of points for me. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there was definitely a. But my egoic mind would take over, and that part of wanting to be independent. Yeah. I'll sort this myself. You know, that took over, rather than really listening. Deep inner listening, I was deaf to that.
Yeah, but there was something in you that was calling you to another experience, to another knowing. Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've often wondered, you know, what is it in us that makes that shift at that particular point, or those points? I mean, as an astrologer, I could certainly look at it astrologically, but I also feel that it's grace actually that calls us and says there's more.
Yes, I would agree with that totally. And you know, grace is actually suffering.
Yes.
The seed of grace is in the suffering, isn't it?
Yeah, the seed of grace is in the suffering, actually. Yeah, that's so potent. Yeah, because it's like that light of consciousness that we are is in the experience, however we dress it up, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, we can make it look whatever way we want to. That's our power of creativity, if you like. But inside that experience is the seed of our original consciousness that's actually perhaps longing to return to its true nature. Yeah, that's the way I see it. So in Psyche's journey, she has a series of tasks that she has to undertake in order to move into this series of into this process of maturity. Because as she lights the lamp, what happens is a drop of oil falls onto Eris's shoulder. He wakes up, and what was threatened happens. He flies off. Everything disappears, the palace, the gardens, everything, and Psyche is left alone. And there is that point in our journey where I feel we really have that realization, you know, I am alone, it's up to me. So Eros flies off to his mother, actually, which is kind of another part of the journey in terms of male maturity into masculine, is that he has to sort things out with his mother before he can truly be an equal and conscious partner with Psyche. So Psyche undertakes these series of tasks, and in the tasks she's both alone, but she always has supporters that appear. And her final journey is the journey through the underworld, yeah, which we could call the dark night of the soul. Many of us who awake or awakening understand that as a process. Like you said, the seed of grace is in the suffering. So in your journey through the underworld, which would have happened as you faced that living in 3D experience, who were your helpers?
Well, I had many helpers along my way. You know, hindsight's a great tool, but I can look back and see. But initially, for me, the darkness came in the form of suicidal thoughts and believing that that was probably the best way to go. Really convinced myself of that. It's a complex mind, and I was introduced into self-help groups, you know, so that was my initial stepping stone into getting support and help from others who had an understanding of what I was experiencing at that time. So that's, you know, because it took me a while, but I reached out for that help. You know, you know, how much pain do you take before you actually shout out for pain, especially when you know, you're brought up to deal with things on your own and sort it out yourself and just get on with it. And you know, so to realize that it was support there was mind-blowing for me. Yeah. Well, that's how it started, with just groups. It was groups. It was other people there that had a similar experience or were going through a similar experience. There was always somebody that little bit ahead that would take you by the hand. And what I loved about it was nobody was telling me what to do. It's like I was a bit bolshy in that respect. I didn't like being told what to do. So the fact was, you know, here's some tools, and they're up to you to pick them up. You know, so that was my first introduction. And
Wonderful.
then along the way, many more.
So what I'm hearing from that was a sense of hope, because you were being connected with those who'd had similar experiences. But also, you know, really I was hearing unconditional love, because you were presented with these tools, but there was no compulsion, you know, no demand that you use them in any way, that you needed to fix yourself in any way, that this was just a space for you to share your experience and possibly move beyond it, but not necessarily.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
And can you kind of qualify or quantify how that helped?
How that helped? Yes, it it took a while because I was really in a deep mental fog. I was already physically broken after a serious car accident, and being an active person, that really, you know, this is why I love wholeness, because all these aspects come into play, don't they? And so, you know, the spirit was dampened. I would say I did use the word broken. The freedom. I just saw a vision of a horse there, you know, getting broken in. So I guess that's what I had to be re-broken in. And the fact that you could phone somebody even in the middle of the night.
Yeah.
That I could pick up a phone. Not that I did do that, but you knew that there was somebody there that could be there for you. And it was just like these tools were gently given to me. People were there loving me until I could learn to love myself. And and that I picked that up quite early on, I guess, but it was a lot of work to do. in that underworld that was coming, that I wasn't prepared for. But the great thing about having these people there was many of them had done that as well. So there was always that, it was the support of other human beings.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really. Yeah.
Yeah, powerful. Really, really powerful. And when you were speaking, I was hearing those words you said about the horse, and you had this image of the horse being broken in. And I heard it slightly differently. I heard broken in. And isn't that incredible how, you know, when we are broken, whatever that experience looks like, and I'm sure every human being knows that in some way, that experience of being broken, the opportunity then is to turn inward. Because, you know, when everything is broken externally and our old ways of coping with life are broken, or managing or controlling are broken, you know, that is the gift of grace, where we can turn inward and explore, well, there must be something beyond this. And then being held in that space with others who were in different stages of that same journey as you, so powerful, really. So, you know, that collective journey, that brings in both, doesn't it? The personal and the collective, how we can stand together even in our brokenness, and go inward together as well. Really powerful. So in that underworld journey, you know, Psyche had this series of tasks, which were leading her to the biggest task, which was the underworld journey, which she had to make alone. She was equipped for it. She was given kind of pointers and guidance as to how to make that journey, but she had to make it on her own. And ultimately, I see that we all do. You know, it's a choice we make, because no matter how much support we have, the paradox is we're always facing it on our own, aren't we? You know, we face those demons on our own. So as you got to the real core of the experience and you faced it on your own, what hidden strengths did you find in yourself that helped you?
That I could go it alone.
Wow.
That was the main one, that I could actually go it alone, but I couldn't as well. You said the paradox there.
Yeah.
That I couldn't go it alone. I had to call out to something that was more powerful than me. You know, and at that time, due to religious beliefs that I had, I didn't like the word God at all. And although that's what I had been calling out to, you know, I hadn't had a time of really contemplating what that meant. You know, we just flippantly say things without really thinking about what does that mean. So even though I knew I had to do it alone, I discovered then that there was a power that was greater than me that I could tap into. So even though you are alone, you're not really alone. You know, my human mind told me I was on my own.
Yeah.
But to get to that place of recognizing that my own arrogance, that thinking that I had to do it on my own, I think that was quite an arrogant place to be for me. And recognizing that there was something bigger was quite a revelation.
And that journey from that kind of defensive, protective independence that we all know, you know, I can do it, you know, I can do it, it's okay, you know, I don't need anyone, I don't need any help, you know, which perhaps in popular culture is seen as a kind of strength, but actually isn't. It's like when those defenses start to drop, it's like we dive, in my experience, into true aloneness, which actually could be described as all oneness, which brings that divine connection that you're speaking of. You know, initially we think, you know, I'm tapping into that. But actually what's happening is we're opening the gate to what we already are anyway.
Yes.
You know, we're dropping all the structures that say, I'm not that. So it becomes more of a conscious unity, a conscious knowing, you know, and kind of switches it. You know, I often use the analogy of the humanness being like a car. You know, you get into your car and you drive it. You don't identify with the car as yourself, but it's the tool that you use to move around here if you do. And so, you know, in my experience, it's like the consciousness shifts to consciousness being human rather than human connecting to source or divine or whatever. Yeah, and it works both ways, doesn't it? Yeah, yeah, it works both ways. And, you know, I know that you're in partnership now, and I've had the pleasure and the blessing of meeting your lovely man, Robert, and seeing, you know, the connection between the two of you. So how did that journey, the journey that you took through the underworld, how does it support you in your partnership journey now?
So what's that saying? You've got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. So that was the journey I took in the underworld. But I'm really, I mean, it sounds crazy to some people, but I'm really blessed that I met these guys in the underworld, because I was looking for that side of me that I had dismissed, I suppose. And then when I met Robert, I was very much like, oh my God, you're like me in male form. And he was just like, I was thinking the same, that you're like me. And when you talk about astrology, he's actually a feminine sign and I'm the masculine sign. And I love how all that interlocking play goes on together. And I keep studying. The more I learn, the more I don't know. And so to be with Robert and to have like these conscious conversations, and meet somebody that's willing to grow with me, but separately, if you like, individually, was just a blessing in disguise. Oh, that doesn't mean to say we don't have hell's own rows sometimes, but we don't really have a lot of them, to be fair. But when we do, we've got that maturity to have a conversation around them. And that's what I love. There's no longer, for me, that gut-wrenching fear in my gut when there's voices start to get raised, you know, or shouting through walls and stuff. So we both crave peace, and peace and quiet, and you know, and he's taken up photography. He's way out just now in photography, and it's just like, what do we want for the rest of our time here? But we do love to help others as well. He's very good at that. He's very, very good at helping others, and I think we just complement each other really well. And there's no like, it's fine to be childlike, but not childish. So we can be very childlike, the pair of us. We like to have fun and play and get out in nature a lot. And and he's hilarious. Every day he makes me laugh on a daily basis. And I think I had to come through all that underworld and back out. And
into the light of evolving partnership, you know. And when I was with you, it was probably a couple of years ago now, wasn't it? 2 or 3 years ago up in Inverness. You know, I saw that dynamic of the humor and then the fire, you know, when you kind of sparked each other off. but there was no personal in it. It wasn't held
Right.
on to. It just was what it was, and then move on. You
That's
know,
right. Yeah.
explore if it's needed. But it was just this dance of masculine and feminine, you know, literally sparking each other off and growing through that. That's really beautiful. Really beautiful to see that the evolution of the individual can also be the evolution of partnership.
But also, before I met him, I came to that place on my own,
Yeah,
of being really comfortable and going, well, if I'm meant to be alone, it's fine. I'm okay. That, well, it was very quickly after that I met Robert, but it was a full body knowing of, yes, I'm alive. It's okay. I can go through this journey alone. It's fine.
wonderful.
No need to have anybody else there.
Yeah, yeah, celebrating your aloneness, your all oneness. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and then, you know, if partnership comes along, it's a bonus, isn't
Yes.
it? It's another stage of evolving maturity. So I've been reflecting on Psyche and the journey that we're all in collectively now, you know, through this pandemic. And you could say that as humanity, we're going through an underworld journey, which I consider to be really essential in terms of our relationship to the earth and the environment, let alone our own bodies and our own psyche. Yeah. So what would you say to someone who is going through that dark night of the soul or that underworld journey at the moment? What would you say? What would be the one thing that you would want to gift that individual?
I would just really urge them to reach out to somebody, even if they have to go in Googling something. You know, I'm working just now with another community of people where we've been Googling a lot, and I had to go into that place of where I was in that dark night of the soul to what? Because I didn't have Google then. I was like, what would I be actually looking for? And what I came up with was, I've had enough, you know. And so I thought, well, what would I actually Google? And when is enough enough? Or I've had enough or something. And there was over 1 billion searches for that.
Wow.
Over 1 billion searches. I was
Wow.
like, people have had enough, you know.
Yeah.
It's just like, so there is many people out there that are looking for something, and I believe, and we already know the statistics of mental illness has heightened, and suicide rates have gone through the roof. You know, people are actually doing that. They're taking that action. They're not like where I was contemplating it, really feeling I would, but luckily took a different route. I would be like, just please just reach out to somebody. There's so many support groups out there, and I mean that's sort of work we do as well. It's,
Yeah.
you know, to guide people to a different place maybe, and to support and be there. We can't do it alone. Not when we're at that place. You know,
No.
we need that guidance.
Yeah, there's truth in that. You need someone to hold your hand when you're in that place.
Yeah.
To offer that.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. Thank you so much. So I'm going to complete by reading another piece from the Psyche chapter, and it's connected with that underworld journey. It may be difficult to countenance that our darkest, most challenging experiences have a purpose, the purpose of growing us. Yet such depth of understanding shines a light that will take us from victim to creator if we allow it to. Psyche teaches us that in this willingness to experience the journey, in the vulnerability to engage with it, even though we may not know exactly where it's leading us, we are supported. It may not feel like we are supported, yet if we can open and accept, the mystery appears as a guide and support. Psyche's journey takes her from innocent girl to goddess. Each player in her myth has a role in that. Aphrodite, who's also known as Venus, played her part as antagonist to bring Psyche into maturity, just as others play that role within our lives. It seems that she was working against Psyche, yet in truth, the journey was for them both, goddess and girl, divine and human. In this synergy, the soul's desire to experience and express itself is fulfilled, whilst the human evolves both for itself and for the collective. Soul help is always available to us. The journey is, as Psyches, to allow our human experience, to stay open and vulnerable, to trust our deeper self, and to attune to our own subtleties. The wondrous quality of Psyche's gift to us is contained within her acquiescence. Although seemingly passive, it's this very quality that allows her soul to grow her. Vulnerability, which is returned to innocence, to inner sense, to natural trust, is the key.
You said inner sense there, I was thinking in no sense.
Yeah.
To be in no sense.
In no sense. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and in inner sense. That deeper place. Yeah. Oh, well, thank you so much, Lorna. Thank you. I really have loved our chat today.
Thank you.
And if people want to know more about what you share, then there will be some information in the end titles, as well as information about your book, my book, and where people can get in touch. So thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.